Hello and welcome to part 15 of the Refuting Marx's Inconsistency TSSI series. YouTube just kicked us off our previous one for no known reason. So here we are. We're going to start again and start from where we had left off. Now we have got up on the screen there. Hopefully everybody should be able to see it. We had just finished doing 1 and 2. We were we nearly finished 3, had we?
I'd read 3. Direct textual evidence suggests that Marx was a single system theorist. A Gildillo evidence favors system interpretation. Evidence adduced on the behalf of dual system interpretation is equally compatible with the single system interpretation. And I had said, if you use the heuristic of charity and the heuristic of parsimony, the single system interpretation is thus simpler. Therefore, if they both explain it, the simpler one wins. Duh.
Right. And the thing that I was just about to say was that there's been a long controversy about Engels' editing of Volume 3 and whether he distorted what Marx was saying. Well, I mean, it turns out that he cut something that was sort of important. And when you restore that, it becomes absolutely clear that Marx was a single system theorist. The new editor, it's the cost price equation that Ramos points to for the melt, and Andrew actually brings up the quote in his book. And in the new introduction by the editor of the restored Volume 3, who happens to be Fred Mosley, he points out the same equation.
Which version is this? Because my Volume 3 is the hold on.
This one was just, I think, put out under the historical materialism series.
Oh, it's not even called that. It's called the economic manuscripts of blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
But it's not called Volume 3 because it's not the edited Engels version. Yeah, so...
Right.
And I mentioned to you that I saw that was coming out like a few months ago, and I was super excited because I'm like, oh, we can finally set this to rest in English. Right. I don't have to learn... I mean, I don't have to... I actually do read German, but I don't have to like go and get access to the thing that Heinrich makes a big deal out of that I can't get in the United States.
Mega.
Yeah, the mega.
Well, you know, who do we trust more, Engels or Mosley?
Well, I mean, love Engels, but he cut out the cost price equation and kind of contributed to this dual systems reading.
I know, yeah, I'm only being sarcastic, but you know, unless you have really what they should do is scan them all in and let people be able to upload them on the internet. Yeah, God damn it, he's a communist.
Yeah, well, you know, Wishart doesn't do that anymore. But at least now we do have the supposedly the unedited version of the manuscripts. So this is supposed to be as close to straight translation of the notes as you get.
Yeah, and Kleiman's conclusion lines up with the editor of that manuscript. So
yeah, take that, Heinrich.
Okay, let's move on. To part 4. Proofs of the Okishio theorem are logically invalid. Lexi, over to you.
Well, this is the only one that I don't agree with as written. As I've mentioned before, Kleiman is pulling a bit of a rhetorical fire punch here by saying that because it doesn't actually replicate Marx's theory and it's meant to replicate Marx's theory, therefore it's logically invalid. But it's logically invalid in the sense that it follows from its premises. The problem is the premises don't actually model Marx.
Yeah, it's logically valid in that it follows from its premises, but its premises are not Marxian. So it's a disagreement on premises, not a disagreement on validity. And that's a misstatement of formal logic, technically. So if to make this statement more true, we could say the proofs of the Okishio theorem, if viewed as a representation of Marx's theory, would be logically invalid.
Correct.
If they are logically valid, they are not a representation of Marx's theory.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's okay. So we're quite clear on that then. So number 5, the Okishio theorem does not disprove Marx's law of the tendential fall in the rate of profit. Its conclusions hold only true when input and output prices are a priori assumed to be equal.
AKA you cheated.
Yeah, simultaneism.
Okay, that's essentially the same point that we made on the previous one. Okay, so we will move on. So then we have point number 6. Puya, can you see it? Do you want to read it?
Yeah. The law of a tendential fall in the rate of profit becomes logically valid once a priori assumption that input and output prices are equal is jettisoned. If faster productivity growth tends to lower prices, the temporally determined rate of profit, A, can fall under the conditions in which Okishio theorem says that it must rise, necessarily tends to fall in relation to a theorem's simultaneous physicalist rate of profit, and can fall forever even if a simultaneous physicalist rate of profit rises forever. And yeah, I think the TSSI successfully demonstrates that this is the case in accordance with Marx's value theory as stated, and his law of a tendential fall in the rate of profit and volume 3. Yeah, I think it's a great representation of this and does the job perfectly.
Yeah. Anybody?
As far as as far as I can tell with the knowledge base that I have.
Right. And again, just to make a note about pluralism, like, Andrew's not saying this is the only way Marx can be read in general, but like, this is the one that makes sense of Marx. This is the one that builds his model and comes to his conclusions.
Yeah, and he says that this is a good reason to adopt this interpretation is because it makes sense of Marx.
Because the heuristic of charity would dictate. I know I'm bringing up all these like analytic heuristic rules, but they're good to remind people of. The heuristic of charity would dictate that if you have two interpretations, one of which makes something not make sense, and one of which makes something make sense, you take the one that makes something make sense because you assume that the stronger argument is what is meant.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to note that the thing about the TSSI properly representing Marx, it's actually kind of the only thing everyone agrees about. Even the TSSI's harshest critics, they don't go in and say that Kleiman and Freeman and the TSSI people they're misconstruing Marx and we're doing Marx we're doing the more faithful version. They don't claim that. They all sort of either implicitly or explicitly say that the TSSI is the fairest representation of Marx, or at least an accurate one. But the critics of the TSSI usually sort of use that to say, well, that's why Marx is wrong, and that's why our models are right.
Yep.
But they're inconsistent, and they move the goalposts because they will present themselves as representing Marx until you bring this up, and then they'll be like, well, yeah, but Marx is wrong, and we're correcting Marx, and so I'm Marx now.
Yeah. Well, there's a long. To be fair to this is not just true in Marxian economics. Like the orthodox Marx thing has always been like, even if every single point of Marx is wrong, Right. We could still be orthodox Marxists because of methodology that we also don't state in any form or
because he rocks a good beard.
Yeah.
Is that like the Lukashian reading of Marx?
Yes, that's exactly the Lukashian reading of Orthodox Marxism. Is every single point of Marx could be wrong, but if the formal methodology holds, even if we change definitions in it, which means the formal methodology actually technically doesn't hold, but whatever, we could still be orthodox, and like that's nutty. But anyway,
it was supposed to be a troll. It was supposed to be a troll to the orthodox Marxists of the day, but it became its own like kind of critical theory orthodoxy. And
I think a lot of people cite this stuff when they do this crap to Marx. I really do.
Well, but the weird thing is that the analytical Marxists very clearly say like, look, there's no Marxist methodology, right? Like, but then they go and do this like funny stuff with Marx anyway. So people with different frames of reference have somehow all converged on this terrible reading of Marx. And that's probably the thing that made it most convincing even to specialists, is that everybody basically agreed on what Marx is. Like in the Cold War, there was a similar, grappling with Marxism. Everybody basically agreed what Marxism was, and it was, except for the dissident Marxists that were like, no, wait, please.
Yeah. Marxism isn't Stalinism. And now Marxism isn't goddamn Schraffianism or whatever the hell we want to call it.
There's a lot of, Schraffianism I actually don't think is the predominant form of Marxism you're going to encounter, frankly. But
yeah, it's like more of this like postmodern,
I know, but we're just talking
Frankfurt
about
school.
We're just talking about the economics part.
Don't mark the
I know. But when it comes to economics stuff, it is this simultaneous stuff.
Yeah.
It is Mosley. It is Scheich. It's all these guys. Let's just read number 7 here. 7 is basically, it's tied into number 6. And it just says all results in point. If 6 hold true, whether or not the faster productivity growth actually all results in point 6 hold true, whether or not faster productivity growth actually causes prices to fall. It only needs to lower the rate of inflation. Okay, so that's kind of a technical point. That's not a major one. 8. Who wants to read 8? Lexi, give it a go.
Let's do it. Borkovich did not prove that Marx's account of the price-value transformation is internally contradictory. Simple reproduction can occur when input and output prices differ. Hence, there was no logical need to correct Marx's account. The so-called, quote, correct solutions are actually alternatives to his. This is, again, another variation on the single system theme. Simple reproduction can occur when input and output prices differ, is then also connecting to the simultaneous theme. This is kind of the logical heart of the TSSI, maybe in one retort to one thinker. That's all here.
But
so
really,
when you
have to go back over that chapter, and I don't want to do that. So
like the big thing for like the big reason why Marx's theory fell apart is because they thought there was a problem with the transformation problem, and that was used to do all the other stuff. So this is for me, it's a major result. It shows how the transformation problem occurs, and it's not an issue. Anybody who thinks it's an issue either doesn't understand it right or is doing it for their own reasons.
Yeah, and the correct solutions are different. Like when people work out Berkovich's answers to correct solutions, they're actually not the same thing. See, that's another...
No, totally different thing. It's apples and oranges.
Yeah, but Paul Sweezy says that this, refounds Marx on a new basis where we could finally do the science we wanted to.
Yeah, he was high in goofballs during that period of his life.
Well, so am I. It's not an excuse.
You're taking goofballs?
Extra strength. Extended release.
9.
Extended release.
When Marx is interpreted as a single system theorist, all 3 of his aggregate value prices of qualities are obtained, meaning all the aggregates work. You don't have to block one out like you do in all of this. This one's actually not clear if you don't know the background to number 8, but
right.
But because the reason why the Borkovich's things don't work is the aggregate qualities don't work.
Yeah, so not only does it make sense of Marx's text, it also makes sense of the implied mathematics or the explicit mathematics in Marx's text, for the love of God.
Yeah. So Marx really liked those 3 aggregate price values. They were the things that basically made him think he had solved the transformation problem. And, they hold. Okay, so number 10. We're really rocking through this. This is good. We'll be finished in 10 seconds. 10. However, when Marx is interpreted as a simultaneous single system theorist, the rate of profit is physically determined, contrary to what he concluded. Hence, the logical validity of his account of the transformation is fully confirmed only when he is interpreted as a temporalist. So this is very important. If you are a simultaneist, one of the things that happens is that the rate of profit is not determined by the amount of labor time, but it becomes determined by the physical surplus. So it's a physical rate of profit. We started with 100 bushels of corn. We now have 120 bushels of corn. Our rate of profit is 20, regardless of the amount of extra labor, surplus labor that's involved. So like, you can't hold a labor theory value in your head and simultaneous valuation. If you're doing that, your theory is illogical. It's invalid. It doesn't. They're a contradiction of each other.
Right.
So
we mean that in the like strict syntax contradiction, not even in that hazy Hegelian contradiction way. Like it's a direct contradiction. You can't do it.
Right.
Exactly. It's a logical, analytical logic, mathematical logic problem that is showing that your theories are incoherent. Full fucking stop.
And that's what's the most challenging thing about, I just pointed to Fred Mosley as an authority because he was editing, Engels, he was editing Marx's manuscripts. But, at least according to Andrew, right? Mosley is doing the simultaneous valuation, even though he has, very different and much more textually, sound like justifications for doing whatever he does. Then I guess like he's still doing something crazy illogical too. Like,
yeah. Well, he has some textual stuff to back him up, but he's loads of stuff that goes against what he says.
Well, you know what I mean? Like the guy is steeped in Marx. He's steeped in you have to really understand the subtleties of the third critique. It's historically relative. It's just blah, 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 blah. Like he's got all this nice, like, post-Marxist scholarship down. Like, well, language, but also like, I don't know. The post-Marxists have something on the old Marxists in that they don't give a shit about anything. So they're not like as motivated to do anything. So they don't have the motivated reasoning problem because they're just sort of nihilists. And so they could actually fucking read without things getting in the way. And that was a good wave of scholarship, even if, they're not, paragons of virtue. And so the Marxists that read this stuff, I feel like shouldn't be making these mistakes.
Yeah, because Andrew implies that his incoherence is an error on his part, not because the implication is Mosley doesn't think he's a simultaneous, but he actually is. Right?
Yeah,
that was the argument.
Yeah,
but it's not only that argument.
That's the point, and
it's that too, and that he's not representing the text. It's a double point.
Yeah, he had to text proof, not. He didn't have a whole text reading. It's like when you it's like picking, and Marxists are notorious for doing this, frankly, like cherry picking like Marx like it's friggin' Bible verses to just throw at people, like quote text without putting the entire argument.
Yeah, I mean the beef between Andrew and Mosley. Not that I think we should spend too much time on it, but the way I've understood it is basically that it's about the transfer value from constant capital, and Mosley is saying that it's the value, and Andrew is saying that it's the price, and Marx actually in Capital Volume 1 clearly says that it's the value, but Andrew is saying that look, if we do it the way, if we do it by saying that it's the value that transfers, then Marx's theory breaks down. So we should look at the whole of Marx's texts. And try to make it make sense. And if he somewhere says that it's the value, then we might just, interpret that as an error or an oversight on Marx's part rather than as scripture or whatnot. So that's what a lot of it is about as far as my understanding goes.
Yeah. So that's also the point there is also then Volume 1 that Marx equates labor and value and price. So when he says value in that sense, you could be taken as price too if they're both supposed to be equal.
Yeah, because they're equal throughout the book.
they're equal all the way through volume 1. So that's like, you can even make the text make sense that way and not say it's an error, couldn't you?
Oh yeah.
You
No,
could,
absolutely.
until you
I'm
read
just
the
saying.
later. I think when you read later volumes, it becomes impossible to maintain. But anyway,
until volume 3, there's no theory of price. And I think
which
that
is why a lot of Marxists don't get to it, because most Marxists don't read volume 3. Seriously.
Yeah, and they think that there's a labor theory of price. Like, I get this a lot from people that have only read volume 1.
Right. And
happened to me all the time.
Yeah.
I was at the bus stop the other day, and there was an old woman with her shopping, and she said, I would think there's a labor theory of price and not a labor theory of value, and I had to set her straight.
You know what? I wish I was there so bad, Tom. I wish I was there so bad.
You know what's that is when you hear like street preacher refutations of Marxist economics, that is what they fight against, is the labor theory of price.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, well, I made this cake and I sold it for $200, so I made this mud pie and sold for $200, and so there you go, Marxists. Gotcha.
Yeah, luxury goods
Socially,
exist. Like
socially necessary, motherfuckers. Socially necessary. Okay, moving on.
Or the painting problem.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, so that number 10 has the heart of the interpretive controversy. The interpretive controversy between serious Marxist adults is in number 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the others are not serious Marxist discussions, really.
No.
Because we all got bogged down on Mosley, not just here, but when we were actually discussing this, because Mosley was the one where I'm like, this is actually subtle and involves real, not just obviously transparently false.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's when I had my homosexual pangs.
Exactly.
Give in.
Relax. Now, let's go on to number 11. I've just got me taking me poppers there. Now I'm fully relaxed.
Fucking nailed it.
So we have
nothing beats good butt sex jokes in the morning. Let me tell you.
That's what my mother always said.
Yeah, you really are.
I'm a tasteless man. Now here we go.
Welcome back to grad school, Cumtown.
Yeah. So, Emmanuel, you can't read what's on the screen at all, can you?
Oh yeah. Of course I can.
You can. Oh, do you want to do number 11?
I might. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the fundamental Marxian theorem does not prove that surplus labor is either necessary or sufficient for the existence of profit. On all simultaneous interpretations, Marxist theory implies that there can be profit without surplus labor, and vice versa. Pretty straightforward. I mean, he's just restating the things. And for those of you who weren't around for the episode about the fundamental Marxian theorem, the fundamental Marxian theorem states that, well, at least Marx was right in that profit comes from me paying you less than what you give me, and that's what it all is about. And so we can have a corn theory of surplus, where you produce more corn than it took corn to reproduce you. Therefore, there is profit, and that's all we need to care about in our politics and whatnot.
Well, it's a little more ambitious than that, though. Because that's the Trofian physicalist read of exploitation. But it was also promising that it would be surplus labor in particular, that you could recreate the Marxian exploitation theory of profit, without relying on his value.
Yeah.
If that were true, that would make value theory much less important, because it's okay, we can just plug this into historical materialism and we don't lose the overall revolutionary bent, whatever.
Sure, but Marx does say, I mean, the definition of surplus labor is the labor performed over and above what you receive as wages. So if you receive corn wages and you produce more corn than you received in wages, then you are performing surplus labor in in the Marxist sense, even with Strophian assumptions.
You got me on that Strophian corn wage, man.
But
this was the one with the where it ended up with negative surplus labor and positive profit.
Yeah. This was not benefit at work, but this is the one I think.
Once you departed from the equilibrium just a little bit. This one was one of the more unusual ones.
It is totally weird when you did the math on it, but if you were talking to men on like the Marxist on the street, this is the only one that I encounter on a regular basis. I'm being serious. Like, think about the way your people who just shrug off value theory is completely unimportant to Marxist politics. How they justify it is this.
Right.
They don't call it this, but that's how they justify it. So this is the one to me that's actually, even though it's not a major point in the book, it's actually the most important one to deal with street level Marxist errors. Because if you like map it out and show the logic of it mathematically, you end up with absurd conclusions from it. So like I actually think this one's weirdly important for like everyday life. But like most of street Leninists actually have a folk version of the fundamental Marxist theorem going on in their head. Like, seriously.
Damn. Hot take. Loving it.
So
no, really, I didn't think that
more important than Kleiman does. So, and he thinks it's important, but I think it's even more important. So,
yeah, I thought it was just important from like a research program perspective.
Yeah, no, you heard this a lot, especially from like college professors who want to teach Marxist theory. Like they're all like, "Yeah, this is what Marx is getting at." You know, that's what he's getting at is this exploitation theory, where you receive less than you produce, and that's really all you got to know. That's it, folks. This value theory is mystical and esoteric.
But most of your Leninists you argue with, that's what they really are saying. Like value theory isn't important because we really need to care about this as exploitation. And then you're like, yeah, but there actually are real world implications to you cutting the rest of this argument off. Like it matters. You could come to absurd conclusions and calculations and stuff if you actually just focus on just that.
It's also
and argument is so complicated, so why don't we just skip Marx's argument and go straight to his conclusion? Because his conclusion is obviously correct, but like the argument is weird and hard to follow, so let's just not bother. That's sort of the
4,000 pages of book.
I mean, to be fair, because you can't trust any of the scholarship and make like a competent textbook, so yeah.
Yeah, no, this is true. I've literally had someone, it was the Cult Doc Stars guy, literally was saying, like, I don't understand why people care about repetitive, weird text like Capital because it's not really important. And like, again, fundamental Marxist theorem is what they're operating off of. That's the only important thing. No, it's not. Like...
Well, he's thinking in terms of research program, and that's what the analytical Marxists were kind of doing when they were... I guess, I don't know if these people were like... I don't know if the Japanese economists thought of themselves that way, but the analytical Marxists pick up on them as if they are, you know, like they're the sort of forebearers of this. People that are trying to be like, all right, look, we need to keep our research program intact. Like,
or frankly, they're also trying to keep their political program intact.
Well, yes, but the research program to them is instrumental to the political program.
Right.
You know, it's like we were saying earlier, I think before the call started to Puya and Alex, was that it's like, you know, somebody trying to figure out what was like trying to understand the man in the street, what was Einstein's theory of general relativity, and they said, oh, things fall down. You know what I mean? And it's like, like, you know, you'd be probably that's probably 99% accurate, but it wouldn't help you if you're trying to make a rocket. You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly.
And so it's fair enough that the man in the street thinks about that's from Marx, because it is a major point. Like the fundamental Marxian theorem is a kind of a way. It's like a rewired version of the theory of exploitation, and that is an important part of it. But like, you know, and it's not unusual that people think that's what Karl Marx is about, because it's definitely a massive core part, and it's an easy part for people to get their heads around.
It's also the moral part of what people can get their heads around.
I think that was probably one of the most important things in Capital, Volume 1. Yeah, that's like one of the, like, if I was gonna summarize Capital Volume 1 in 5 minutes, I'd probably include that, the theory of exploitation.
Yeah, theory of exploitation, theory of commodity. That's you know,
the value form. I'm going to get a 10-second penalty for that. The value form and the theory of exploitation. That's Volume 1.
Primitive accumulation.
Capital. Yeah, the circuit of capital and accumulation.
Yeah.
So primitive accumulation.
Notice how we keep on
relative and absolute surplus value.
Yeah. Notice how we keep on adding.
Let's just read out all the fucking chapters.
It's important. It's actually an important theory, and I'm glad that we get the chance to talk about it clearly.
All right.
Okay.
12.
No, wait. Now, the one thing, what really got me surprised with the fundamental Marxian theorem was the fact that even a thing there that shouldn't really care about time, that it falls in its ass when you make it simultaneous. That's something deep. That means that, you know, it's true. To me, that was like, that's just like kind of, you know, that's something you think that should be statically, you should be able to formulate. And even then it falls on its ass.
Yeah, no, that's actually an important point. I agree, because it makes this time element and the historical element, it's not just about narrativizing. Like a lot of people think that's what the historical part of, you know, like historical material is like, you know, the narrative of history. It's not just that. The math doesn't work. You know, the non-narrative parts of this don't work if you don't have time in the equation. So, yeah.
Okay, Derek, do number 12.
When Marx is read as a temporal single system theorist, his theory implies real profits exist when, but only when, surplus labor has been performed, which is like, duh. All right, 13.
And wait, I think there's an important point in this.
I think so too, Derek.
I think it's an important point because it's obvious. But go ahead.
No, but
no.
The real in parentheses.
Yeah, Puya's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the real in parentheses, that's important, that the TSSI implies that nominal profit can exist with the increasing rate of inflation. If a rate of inflation, if the technical change the fall in the rate of prices due to technical change does not outweigh the increase in prices due to inflation, there can be nominal profit.
Wait, is this a stab at post-Keynesians?
This is definitely, to me, this is definitely something that has implications for MMT.
And I think this is also that just a stab at the fundamental Marxian theorem as well.
Yeah.
Because he's saying that profit can exist only when surplus labor has been performed. Because profit can exist using the fundamental Marxian theorem if no surplus labor has been performed.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not accounting for nominal and real profits.
Okay. Can we move on? I think, or have we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got
everything? Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. No, that was good. That was a super subtle point. I would have blown right through it.
Yeah, me too. I just said duh.
Yeah, you two don't have an ounce of Puya's intellect. Okay, Puya, good man. Maybe you can be another 30.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Okay,
I'm Puya have a podcast. Puya, when is your podcast coming out?
I don't have time for a podcast.
Fair point.
Tom, you should just give all your patron money to Puya.
That'd be amazing. I am so poor. That'd be wonderful. That would solve all my problems.
Puya is the only reason people listen to this goddamn show anyway. Yeah.
But fuck that, Emmanuel. How would I pay for my yacht?
That's true.
Okay.
You can come on Puya's yacht.
I got a couple of them. I'll send one over to you, Tom. I'll send one over in my private jet.
Are we making yacht communism jokes? All right, let's go.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Freddie Angles.
Yeah, that'd be my favorite type of communism, yacht communism. Okay.
Yeah, it was a thing. It was a thing.
Luxury yacht communist.
Communism, yeah, space
Yes.
yacht. Space yacht. Oh wow.
I'm a communist of the mansion tendency, of the top hat monocle tendency. Okay.
Monopoly communism.
It exists. It's called the Koch brothers.
Okay.
Oh right.
Yeah.
True.
Even if evidence that values and prices are strongly correlated and close were valid, it would not tend to support Marx's value theory, owing to a spurious correlation problem. The evidence is invalid. Recent studies have found that no statistically significant correlation remains after the problem is corrected. This also implies that values and prices are not close in the relevant sense. Yeah, because after you control for industry size by using cost of production, you'll see that there is no statistically significant relationship between the value produced and the price that the firm obtains with the TSSI interpretation.
So this backs
this
up.
was counterintuitive, but it's important.
This one backs up the
it's
idea.
really intuitive. I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
No. Farhad.
All right. Yeah. So but it is kind of intuitive if you're thinking about what Kleiman is actually saying here. Which also, to be perfectly honest, I don't think Kleiman's critics understand his point here. And so the intuition here is that so why do firms or industries that perform a lot of work, right? Why do they make so much profit? Well, some people will read that evidence and say, well, this just proves the labor theory of value, right? Okay, so they have a lot of workers, and they therefore a lot of labor. They receive the most profit, ergo, labor theory of value. Whereas Kleiman is saying, no, wait, hold on a minute. That's just because they're big. And if they're big, that means that they employ a lot of people. Right? But that doesn't mean that. So then if I can reduce all of that, if I can explain the same data set and just say that, well, what you're really having here is not a labor theory of value at all, because you're not looking at actual labor performed, you're looking at wages paid. So really all you have is an industry size theory of value. The only reason why it looks like a labor theory of value is because they hire a bunch of workers, right?
Which is a spurious correlation.
So they're big, which is a spurious correlation. But I think it is really intuitive if you think about it that way, that, a lot of work could also just be a sign of big industry.
Right. This is a thing that's intuitive once you see the example, but when you have it stated in abstract, it isn't at all.
Oh yeah, sure. But I think quite honestly, most of Kleiman's critics on this point do not understand where he's coming from, and they genuinely do not understand why he thinks that this is the case, or that you could control for anything in this regard. So
yeah. Why do you think that is? Because I find it really. I don't have a lot of training in statistics, and I kind of aim to, so I know how little I know. And it's such a basic point, and I haven't been able to follow a lot of the objections, but I just don't see anything that gets around the third variable explanation for this and the spurious correlation. Just like, what was it, like 95%? It's like when you see an election in, like one of those like Stalinist regimes, and it's like, oh, we got 102% for the leader. It's like, something is wrong. Nothing in life coincides like that. Like,
yeah, And so not to, okay, so maybe we should spend a little time on this point, because we've had an antagonist in the chat really giving us a beating about this. And the clearest articulation of the objection that I've come across so far is that wages are a mediating variable, and so you can't control for it. So the argument, or the theory, that these antagonists, as it were, have underlining their maths and their simultaneous maths and everything. The assumption, or the theory here, is that labor, the labor theory of value, presents itself or is mediated by costs.
Okay.
So since the actual labor performed, so like the labor theory of value, like you can't see it in the real world. It's abstract, right? It's abstract labor, etc. But the way you can see it is in the costs of goods, right? So productivity goes up. That means prices go down, right, etc. So the inputs of a firm, right? Say you're Microsoft, you hire a bunch of workers and you have a bunch of computers, right? The labor theory of value presents itself for that firm as those costs, and so the costs mediate. They are a mediating variable in their particular form of labor theory of value. And if it is a mediating variable, i.e., so you have X causes Y causes Z, or like that's the thing, right? So a mediating variable is something that's in the middle of that chain.
Necessarily.
Yeah. So since it's in the middle of that chain and it's part of the causality, and it's right in the middle, if it's a mediating variable, you cannot correct for it. That's an invalid thing to do in statistics.
Okay.
And so the argument here is, no, we don't buy Kleiman's objection, because what he's done is he's controlled for a cost of production, which is a mediating variable, and you can't do that, because but in there is also sort of tacitly admitting that they really do have a cost theory of value, or a cost theory of price, which is Kleiman's point, you know.
So in admitting this, they kind of, it spills off into the single system, dual system territory. Is that right?
No, this is more of a simultaneous thing. But yeah, I think it feeds into that too. But and also, like, no one has ever presented us, but I've been looking for it, with an argument of why it should be a mediating variable, right? And or evidence for it. It's just, yeah, this is what our theory says. So Kleiman can't control for it, therefore Kleiman is dumb, right? You have to show with evidence why it's correct to see this as a mediating variable rather than just two sides of the same coin. And that's what Kleiman does. Like, if cost of production and their sort of value theory, in quotation marks, if they correlate to such an extent with each other and explain the same data set exactly equally, then it's probably not a mediating variable, right?
I think
regressions between mediating variables, like that just doesn't happen.
But there's also the fact that Andrew did the thing where he controlled for the cost And he would say that even if I control for the cost, your theory should still predict the bit that's added.
Yeah, that's what
that's like
his
a deductive mathematical proof, like of what should happen.
His critics, or one of his critics, our antagonist, would claim that no, Kleiman got that bit wrong. That is not the case, because costs are labor is mediated through cost of production. So that's a wrong interpretation of what we're saying. However,
I think that their value theory is that the prices are randomly fluctuating, right? And the labor cost is what they take. It's not. It's like not a.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's a value theory that is not one.
But the labor value is determined by the labor cost, right? The vertically integrated labor cost, and that
exactly
and that this and prices tend to gravitate around the labor cost because it's highly improbable for people to stay in business if they don't meet this cost. So I think in their theory, this cost, the cost is the signal, as they say. But if you take
wages are the other thing that matters.
But if you take that's why I said when I first read this. But this is with the TSSI interpretation. If you take the labor theory value with the TSSI interpretation instead of the Farjun and Mackover interpretation, then this data does not hold for the TSSI interpretation.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's also one extra. There's one extra bit though in there as well, is that in a reply paper that this is kind of after I think the book was published, in a reply paper by Cockshott and I think Cottrell, they put forward a mimicked data set, and then they showed how that it basically price and value were correlated with this mimic data set. And then Andrew mathematically proved that how they generated their data set was actually negatively correlated. So he mathematically proved the correlation in their reply paper. Not a statistical proof or statistical evidence or empirical evidence. It was like he took how they did their stuff and then he went, it's like in-depth, it's like a couple of pages of maths, and he shows how they are negatively correlated in how they did it. So like, to me, I think that I think that Andrew's work here on this is very solid.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. So do I. It's yeah.
As far as I can tell so far, I would like to read more. I would like to read their responses, and I feel like I need more reading on this topic. But
me too.
You can find.
I thought Andrew's argument was pretty strong.
Yeah, and I read he references a lot of these papers also in the book, because the book has been revised and updated with a lot of these debates. But yeah, Kleiman's reply to Cockshott and Cottrell is just bomb. It's like I honestly
have you seen his paper on like the Christian theory of value?
I have.
That thing is hilarious.
It's a delightful parody of like tautological like statistical arguments. It's very funny.
I didn't see that one. I like that. I just like the sound of it. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Let's move on to our last one.
Okay. It's just like the paper that they originally published. It's like a copy of it, but okay, anyways, let's keep going.
Okay. Yeah. Here is number 14. This is a part of the book that we didn't get into that doesn't deal with it that much, I think. let me read this one because I'm in charge. Okay. Böhm-Bawerk's critique of Marx's account of the value. I'm in charge. I'm not in charge. Let's be honest. I'm starting again. This is anarchy. This is anarchy. This is what's the problem. This is why the left will never win. Okay.
Too weird.
This is goddamn communism.
14. Böhm-Bawerk's critique of Marx's account of the value price transformation is insupportable. His key claim, namely that Marx denied that it was self-contradictory to hold that prices do and do not tend to equal values, is implausible and unsubstantiated. Also, Böhm-Bawerk's conclusion that Marx's account is tautological rests on a very controversial premise. Anybody want to talk about this?
Yes.
Bit?
No.
Go, Emmanuel.
Well,
No.
I mean, the first thing.
I mean, we have talked about it a little bit in previous episodes, so we can just link to them or whatever.
To me,
and
this part of the like to me, this part of the book was very like this critique of Böhm-Bawerk. To me, I found very kind of unsatisfying critique, and I didn't find it like central to the arguments in the book at all, and I don't really think too much about it, to be honest. That's the way I feel about it.
Well,
yeah, I thought it was one of the weaker critiques. Go on. What are you saying, Lexi?
Well, I think the reason that it's even here is that Böhm-Bawerk says something, I don't know, he just makes an incredibly dumb interpretive error that, you would do if you're motivated to like debunk something, like that, Marx is basically like saying A is not A or something. I don't know. I that's a really unflattering critique of Böhm-Bawerk, but I don't really think that part of his work is very interesting. And the only reason that it's there is because of the later stuff that he's saying about the potential for tautology, the controversial premises. I don't recall exactly if that relates to Böhm-Bawerk's third thing critique, but I think that might be why this is sort of bracketed off. And it wouldn't be like Andrew to just deal with the one actually challenging thing that Böhm-Bawerk says, but he also wants to deal with a common, street preacher libertarian talking point.
Okay, we've gone through the 14 points. Andrew then goes into a long spiel on why does the myth of inconsistency persist, and a subchapter called The Task Ahead. I don't think we need to go through that stuff again. I think we've talked a lot of that stuff to death. What I'd like to talk about now is, well, firstly, some people on the panel have had kind of negative personal experiences with Andrew, and I was wondering, how do they feel like after reading this book, and do they think the theory stands on its own, and does the experiences you guys have had, to me, if you end up agreeing with the content of the book after all of that, it makes it kind of sound even better. Derek.
Yeah.
Or Emmanuel.
Is Derek?
Oops. Oh, I said I've really
said
this for a while, and and while I think this, while I have a natural tendency to think that Kleiman can be unfair with his interlocutors because, frankly, he's said stuff about me that, while in a very superficial way, could kind of sort of be true, and in an actual way is ridiculous. Like, he called me a McCarthyist. A Marxist McCarthyist. And
that's good. That's a good one.
The specific instance is actually true, but the entire that he's talking about, where I sort of accidentally outed a member of his sect, the context for it makes that completely and totally misleading and unfair. And there are points. For example, when we talk about the Okishio theorem, and when we got bogged down in the Fred Mosley stuff, where I that did inform my suspicion of him being unfair with interlocutors. However, having sat down and gone through at least most of the Schafferin crap, and I feel like that he does seem to be presenting it fairly and honestly. So there is an issue there. I still have a hard time, given not only that personal experience, but also like knowing what MHI's politics actually ends up being. Figuring out what this actually means, or how compartmentalized, it is from this other system, which, when I talk about like the Marxist humanist forebears, it comes out of Dunyaskaya's, Hegelization of Trotsky, moving away from those vanguard party notions and the Leninist notions. But like Dunyaskaya uses highly mystified language, which you would not get from this at all. And I've also known people who, if you were to present TSI to them, would like agree with Kleiman on all the points probably in it economically, but disagree with them on something else, and they get called, Luxemburgist or something. Because there's other things that don't come up in this book, and there's other fights that Andrew has that don't come up in this book, that actually emerge after it. So, but I think this book is ultimately really fair, with like a few minor omissions and like one or two, I wish you put the math tables in an index, like that's really where I come down on this.
Yeah.
Emmanuel?
Emmanuel,
Yeah.
go, Emmanuel.
Yeah. So I would agree with most of what you said, Derek. I think just in summary, Andrew is much fairer to his critics in this book than his critics are of him. Both having like read the critiques and having read him, and like my history is kind of similar to yours, Derek. We had a really sort of nasty falling out. I think 2 years ago. And this was right just a few months after we hung out in Stockholm, and he came over for a debate that I co-arranged with some libertarian, strange people. But
yeah, I saw that video.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that's the first time I probably saw you.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So. Yeah, and it was really nasty. I mean, we probably could never speak to each other again. Like that's what we agreed. But reading this book really makes me miss him, actually, and really makes me regret that our relationship went the way it did, because when Andrew does what he does best, he is so articulate and clear, and I miss having these discussions with him and the ability to email him with questions, etc., because he would always answer clearly and really positively, and like when you were engaged with something that he was really interested in, he would really go out of his way to make sure that you formalize your arguments correctly and stuff like that. So that's it. Yeah, it makes me a little sad, actually, over what happened. But I don't miss the other Andrew, as I'd call it. But like this book reminds me of all the good stuff and all of the good times, as it were. So no, yeah, I
Hello?
Oh.
Hey, Emmanuel?
Well,
he's gone.
Maybe he dropped off for some reason.
So
Interesting.
I wanted to pick up on that a little bit because I actually I don't have this like lingering fondness for Kleinman. We had a wonderful conversation with Seoul. I met him in person. I hosted an event for him in South Korea. But our relationship came up in a misinterpretation I had of him because of something that Douglas Lane presented. And I was not inclined to join the Marxist Humanists because I was already in a group. And when I got out of a group, I had no incline to join a group at all. And the other elements of his politics never made sense to me. The kind of economistic approach, and by here I don't mean like he's doing economics. I mean like there was a debate between Platypus Affiliated Society and him before they had a also equally nasty fallout. Although they were mutually nasty to each other. Where Platypus points out that Kleinman is probably right on all these economic assertions, but Marxism is larger than that. And Kleinman thought the economics was primary. And then the Trump campaign happened. And that was dropped like a rock.
Right.
So I don't...
Okay, so...
I actually, this is important because, and this is not to slag anybody off, this is, if you say this has economic consequences, you have political consequences, you have two options here. Either the person who has thought through this has compartmentalized their politics or has another theory that doesn't come up in this book that is driving things. Or you have to say, how did this very good exegesis of Marx...
Hey, I'm back.
How did this very good exegesis of Marx lead to really, really weird and kind of bad politics that frankly ends up justifying the status quo?
Yeah, I just as someone who had like a sort of... I didn't have a falling out with him or anything. I just sort of backed away when I heard some of these things. But I had a tremendously, positive experience with him on, correspondence. I called him, you know what I mean? We talked like about value theory for like hours. I asked him for like advice and what do you do if you want to like do Marxism in school? Like, that's kind of weird, right? Like, I had positive interactions with him. And, I also never really got the politics going into this. And I kind of have adopted a theory that doesn't hang all that well with a lot of Marxist assumptions or like desires, or even just a healthy personal desire to integrate one's life. But just that like, people are super fragmented and basically modular, more or less. And that very much unlike the way Hegelians would like to say, that there are a lot of parts of the way people think that are strangely cut off from each other. And I think it's actually one of the greatest strengths of the book that Andrew kind of might reflexively understand something about this and want to abstract only the things that he's most certain of in a specific topic, in an important topic, so that he doesn't even, really mention like Leninism or anything, you know what I mean? He doesn't mention anything political, really, like in order to just make that point.
Ardley actually doesn't mention anything historical. This is a purely analytic. That's not true of all his books, actually. His next book
No.
Does apply a lot of this. But
yeah, he mentions Leninism at the end of Failure of Capitalist Production and situates it broadly in a sort of left communist, autonomous sort of tradition, sort of.
But again, like that doesn't, that if you read that book, you have a very hard time with the MHI polemics just 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later. Like it got more and more.
Right. So it's clearly a modular understanding of I don't know. It's clearly a modular structure.
I disagree with you because there's another theory involved in this that doesn't come out in these books, and that has to do with Donetskaya's theory of history. It's tied into C.L.R. James's theory of who the revolutionary subject is. All
but
that
math.
But
before we get off onto this massive tangent, right? I think, like, you know, if we think that Andrew is replicating Marx's politics, or Marx's account in of Capital, and I will get there in a second whether we all agree, but I think we do agree. And you know, Andrew's politics aren't Marx's politics. People are different. People have different lives. And what I want to kind of get at today
that's liberal bullshit, though. Like,
sorry?
No. Come on, man. Like you have to acknowledge that, you know, someone can read a book and tell you what's in a book without their whole bong rip philosophy coming into it.
No.
It doesn't have to come out.
But the idea that that this is just a matter of, oh, this weird dude's idiosyncrasies, that's not true.
Well, look, I think we're getting exactly down the road of where I didn't want the discussion to get, to be honest. Like, literally, I'm not trying to be smart. Like, I think like what I want to get at is like what people think of this book and its political implications, not about what do we think about Andrew and his politics.
Well, Derek thinks they're connected.
There's an argument to be said that they are connected, but I think that also that can be overstated, and also we can just end up in a big long screed about where people give out about Andrew, and I'd like not to do that because I'd like to be able to get back on the show again. The
thing is, I don't think this is really about Andrew and I's personal stuff is between Andrew and I, and it's personal. The politics issue isn't personal.
But I know that, but but the thing is, like, look at all the different people. Like, not everybody's politics are lined up with their theoretical understanding. That's got to be.
I would say that's the majority. I would say that's the majority case, and I think the more that you look at some of the greatest minds in history of science, or I don't know, some brilliant philosophers, like, and even the way that you intuitively read as a good academic, you know, like a bunch of our important legal scholars and philosophers are like fucking Nazis. You know what I mean? Like, and people can still find things that are important to like draw out.
We literally just had
like Heisenberg, he was in the Freikorps.
Quantum mechanics is historically fascist.
Right.
It's the uncertainty of the humanity of your enemy.
You guys are strong in the argument, and that's
no. All right.
Yeah, you
are.
All right. You are.
Then bring it then.
We just had a whole argument about how this entire coherent stuff of Marx was actually completely relevant and had to be viewed in its whole systematic underlying. And to be frank, this Capital was planned out as a longer series that dealt with every element of the bourgeois state, including the state itself. Marx never got there.
Marx never got there.
Right. But that was the goal. So
I agree.
So when you say that, like, it's actually being uncharitable to what Andrew would represent himself to say, oh, it is just compartmentalization. And furthermore, this is not about Andrew. This is about the way this would inform the politics of the MHI. If it does, and if it doesn't, it is a cop-out to say it is just about how we all individually compartmentalize, because it's not an individual. That is a cop-out.
Well, is it really? Because not every resistance liberal does value theory. You know what I mean?
Look,
like,
hey, I think Tom was making a moderator point, not a philosophical point about compartmentalizing. Right. He was making the point, like, maybe we should move on. That's how I read Tom. And I did not read Tom as saying. I was making
the broader point.
Yeah, I'm actually arguing with Lexi, not Tom.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with Lexi. I think it's not a simple thing like the person's theory and then their politics is a function of that. It's not a simple relation.
But we're not talking about dialectically about it. We're talking about a goddamn group.
Yes, but in reality, though, that group is a group. It's Andrew, and it's Andrew's group. You know what I mean? He's the figurehead. He's the guy in charge. He's the person who set it up. It's really his vehicle. Let's be honest about it. It's not like it wasn't ever your group.
Yeah. I mean, like the way that
it's kind of like the great man theory.
Well,
Yeah,
no.
I mean,
like if you understand
if
you understand the history of the Marxist humanists, like they split like over personal contention. You know, yeah, that is broadly true.
Yeah.
But anyway, can we move it along to get onto our understanding of the text?
I would like to do
enough about that. I think people understand our points here. They understand, Derek, your broad point, and they understand, say, my or Lexi's side of it, and they understand that we want to talk a bit about our own points of view.
Yes.
Let me bring in Emmanuel here because he's Swedish and he'll calm us all down with his neutral tones. Emmanuel, I think I would be right to say that you're a true believer in this book. Do you think it stands up to scrutiny? Is he gone? We lost Puya and okay, Derek. Let me go to you then. Derek, do you think you broadly agree with the text and that it does what it sets out to do? It is what it says on the tin.
On the margin of the 14 points that it sets out, with the exception of maybe 14, which is a weak case, and number 4, which could just be stated more charitably. Yes. So,
and do you consider yourself
implications?
Sorry, go ahead.
Political implications, but what I'm interested in for my own interpretation is when you take this out of the sphere of the analytic, where does it go? And the questions that we were raising a second ago, to completely remove that for a second, there is a criticism of this. What?
I'm sorry. I was just kicked out from the call.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you, Derek.
No, cool. There's a criticism of this book that I've heard people make, that it is like the quote. It has the same problem as the quote analytic Marxist, in that its focus on logic dematerializes things, and I don't think that's true. So I don't want to, but I think it's something you do have to wrestle with. And you can't wrestle within just book itself. You actually have to look at the application of the book later. There is also a tendency in the book that makes me uncomfortable, that one could argue that I was doing, but I was also trying to make a point here about this, is Andrew doesn't, in this book, does not allow for his opponents to be compartmentalized either.
Say that again.
Andrew does not allow his opponents, a lot of his opponents in this book, to be compartmentalizedly wrong. He actually does posit that there is motivated reasoning behind most of these errors. That's not just a mistake. Like,
I think he definitely says that about most of them. Yes, not all of them, I don't think.
And that we have. I mean, I do feel like maybe with Schaffer and Richardson, you have some evidence for it, but it's very. It seems weird to accept that element of this book and then go and argue for the compartmentalization thesis when it's about something we like. That seems like in a state of exception, and that's what I was meaning by liberal bullshit. Because part of this book won't let you do that either.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I do think that's a very
Derek, he's dealing with a mathematical model. Like there's a good reason why he's not letting his opponents compartmentalize, simultaneism and physicalism or whatever, because he thinks that they like mathematically are necessitated. One choice necessitates the other.
That's
and he
not
has
what he argues in the first 3 chapters, and you know that.
In the first 3 chapters in the book. like he does argue for this in the book. Like that's, that is what he thinks. And to the extent that we're like, super on board with a lot of these critiques, we at least are provisionally taking on that thesis. And it remains to be seen if somebody like, Moseley can, dislodge that stronger case that the book is making. The weaker case, it does sort of imply the stronger case. But I'm not, I don't know.
Like, I think from my point of view is like, I feel like that when I read it, I feel like some of the theorists that are in there are being politically motivated. I think some of them come up in their time and they learn a certain way. Some of them change. Some of them come on board with the TSSI. Some of them probably hold on to their own theories for too long. Some, even though they mightn't have a political reason for doing it, that, it's not a simple this then that in either case. We can't make it about all the economists in here that Andrew is attacking.
Well, not all of them.
No, I don't. But I do think lots of them are, but I'm not going to make the case that they're all doing it. And similarly, if you're making a case about Andrew's politics, if we think it clashes with this text, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean it just like we say that it's not always the case for those guys being wrong. We're not always going to say that Andrew's politics somehow has to follow from this. It doesn't. We're not saying the same thing. We're being consistent at both ends of the spectrum. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I agree.
Fair.
I agree with you, Tom. So should we talk a little bit about the criticism and the critics? You were asking me if I was on board with the TSSI, or if I still have my doubts, or am I saved?
Yeah, like let me put it to the panel here. Let's put it to everybody. I consider myself a opponent of the TSSI now after reading this book, and I have since I read it the first time, to be honest. And everything I've ever read on Marxist economics have always made me think I'm a TSSI guy. So, Emmanuel, are you a TSSI guy after all of this work?
Yeah, with a few asterisks.
Okay, give us the asterisks.
So I still have two unsolved things. One of them actually was thanks to our antagonist, who pointed out something that I hadn't thought about earlier, but that I think is something that I at least would like to research a bit more and get the answer to. And that is the equalization of profit rates.
Right.
In the TSSI, that's done simultaneously.
Well, it's it's following Marx.
Yeah. But still, you have all the different profit rates from the different industries, and then snap, with a snap of the fingers, all profit rates equalize simultaneously with each other to the generated profit immediately. That's the way the TSSI. That's the way the TSSI
case.
Marx does not make that case, but still, in the maths that we've seen so far, that's what the TSSI does, or that's the way we've done it so far. And
I think that's kind of an abstraction. I think this is he's assuming a certain level of competition.
Yeah,
he's assuming like this dynamic, equilibrium.
Like, I think when he's doing that, he's just showing with these little play models how that equalization could happen. He's not saying in reality this is what happens.
No. But that's not my point. My point is a theoretical, abstract one. How is that determined? What happens? Is there a locus for a problem here? I'm not sure there is a problem. I mean, I'm going with the same line as you guys are, but there's still this sort of small suspicion in the back of my head that maybe I should check this out a bit more rigorously.
Yeah, well, that's healthy.
Well, I think Marx's theory of the falling rate of profit kind of assumes that there's a dispersion of profit rates. You know, because you have these capitalists that introduce the labor-saving technology, and they're increasing their own rate of profit, right?
Exactly.
But,
yeah.
But
all it's showing how the tendency could be worked out.
Yeah, it's like it's an equalizing tendency. It's not, you know, the profit rate.
Sure.
After they introduce the labor-saving technology, their rate of profit increases, but the total social rate of profit is decreasing.
Yeah, sure. Like I get that, but still, it's still a fact that within the TSSI there's a simultaneous element going on, and I'm not certain that it's not a problem yet. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Well, maybe it's not temporal enough. You know.
I think that maybe these statistical arguments that our antagonists like so much, I think they might be useful in formalizing Marx.
I think so too.
Yeah, because there is kind of this statistical element inside of Marx that isn't really formalized.
There's going to be another critique that comes out of this that I've been trying to make, though, that a lot of that I implied out earlier, that the formalizing this in terms of an abstract logic is a methodological deviation from Marx in a way that actually does have implications and creates problems. If, like, I'm literally thinking about this as Emmanuel brought this up. Like, if we have to do the simultaneously just because the model, just to explain it as an abstract model, the problem may be trying to explain it as an abstract model, because Marx doesn't do that and he would perfectly be capable of it. So, does that have any implications? I actually don't know. I don't know at all, but I know that when the only criticisms of this book that I have taken seriously myself, that I still haven't feel like the answer is that one. And the implication about if it has methodological implications that are serious, and which I don't know. And then the other one is the melt issues are still a little bit wobbly in my brain, and I want to read more stuff to work that out, because it's not actually
that was actually my second asterisk, and I have a third one that I'll just mention really briefly too.
Sorry, can you be explicit, Emmanuel? Can you be explicit on what your second one is?
I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't hear that.
Sorry, can you be explicit on what your second problem?
What's the issue with the melt, Emmanuel?
Oh yeah. So the suspicion with the melt rather is like, so I think Andrew and Remus explain it quite well, but there are still a lot of people who think the melt is controversial. I would like to understand more why they think that's the case, and why they think the melt is a shaky thing. I find it both intuitive and I think it makes sense, but it rustles a lot of people's jimmies, and I want to find out why.
I think this is related to the broader questions of monetary theory, and that I feel like that's a real open book in Marxist research, because Marx's theory of money isn't very explicit or clear. Like, it's not very consistent.
Sure.
And it's one of the most important things about our economy right now. So what Derek was relating about one of his doubts is really why I love this book so much, is that it's methodologically, he never is making the argument that we should be doing research this way. He's the only thing in the beginning that tips off what his real kind of philosophical predilections are is that he thinks that the qualitative dimensions of Marxism are much more important than the quantitative. Yeah. He says that right in the beginning, and he means that.
Yeah.
But there's a crypto analytical Marxist methodology going on here, which is superb. It makes the book like really, really elegant and very, I don't know, ultimately, if you can like distill what's in it, I think it's an incredible contribution to the Marxist research program.
Absolutely,
Of anything I've said today that people would have found insulting to Andrew, what you just said, he would find the most insulting.
I know. But that's the thing. I brought up that I loved you know, his book, and that I was also really interested in G.A. Cohen, and he was like, "What? You like analytical Marxism? They're like the worst."
Yeah,
I was like,
and frankly, that was
okay.
my gateway too. Like, you remember when you and I first met each other? Oh God, like 8 years ago, I think, or 7 or 6 or something. Like, you were very young.
My God.
We were talking about dealing with Althusserianism and analytical Marxism in E.P. Thompson. Like, that's what we were dealing with. And Andrew was my gateway out of those. Like, it was my ability to be like, oh, I finally realized between Andrew and E.P. Thompson why I don't think Althusser matters. You know, like,
right.
And stuff like that. So I mean, like, I am immensely thankful that I had
inculcation to Althusser.
I'm also immensely thankful that while I do think Marxism is a qualitative theory of history as much as it is any kind of quantitative economic theory, I don't say that to deny the second one. Thinking about the economics as like where this all really prize out logically, and the implications of that for other things has helped me avoid certain like cultish typologies of history that Marxists fall into. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, like, you know, I mean, like, when you have like weird like stage theories. And I'm a stagist too, but like stage theories, like this bourgeois revolution happens here, therefore like this next stage in the typology has made like it's some weird hermetic system, and not material at all. This you know, I got offended by Polya blaspheming the Frankfurt School earlier and saying they were post-communist. but this combined with that kept me from going in that direction, which I think I would have otherwise. So like there are this book is important, and actually for me this is not the most important of Kleinman's books. For me, the most important of Kleinman's books is where he applies this stuff in The Failure of Capitalist Production. I only read this to make sure I understood that. I mean, frankly, I went backwards. So,
wow.
Because I read that and I was like, oh, aside from this being limited to U.S. data sets because of just data trust reasons, this is great. So I realize that it's a world economy and there's limits to that. But let me read this logical book that explains how he got here. You know, and then like I read it with that, and when I read it this time, I read it with completely different eyes because I wasn't reading it to make The Failure of a Capitalist Production work. I was reading it to like figure out what the arguments were in their own terms, and I also came to it way more suspiciously because my natural inclination when I started was like, I wonder if I was wrong about this book and it's actually really dumb. And the ultimate answer for all my vim and vigor a little while ago is no. This book is good. It is kind of arcane. It deals with a lot of Marxist problems that most Marxists that you were to meet in, like, I don't know, any Marxist group wouldn't even know happened. And you know, and Lexi, you know I'm right about this.
No, it's true. Like there are just these little micro events that, you know, for 4 people it like determines the course of their lives or something for a couple of years or 5 years or something. But you know, no one else is really affected. Marx has a lovely quote in this circular letter to some of the to like Babel and Liebknecht and whatever, where he's talking about like these party professors that join with their own predilections and like just get involved in these total confusions, and they're only really good for being intellectuals, but they can't even really do that. And fortunately, no one's really going to listen to them. Like it always reminds me of that quote. Like you don't really have to worry about these people because no one's going to pay attention. They're just going to keep spinning their wheels. And he's just like, yeah, Marx is best read against the Marxists.
Lexi, so get back to the original kind of question. Are you a TSSI person then? And if you have issues, what are your issues? Because you were very much, I think, of all of the people that probably started the most unsure before you started. How do you feel like this whole process has worked out?
I'm really happy we did this because it confirmed my overall read initially that, wow, this is pretty coherent, and there must be some explanation other than the debate for why this is being repressed. And I really actually read the last chapter with a sort of sense of purpose, being like, whoa, yeah, I guess it would be really important for people to like know about this, that this is actually the, you know, the true reading of Marx. And I was like, you know, but I don't know, because I hadn't like waded into these debates very much, and I didn't, you know, I just didn't have like the analytical skill set, and I had other analytical skill sets, so I knew what it was like, and I knew what it wasn't like, you know, to be able to fully scrutinize all of these claims. But the exhortation at the end, where, you know, he's kind of like, all right, look, you have to do this, you know, you should do this like right now. And if you interact with him, he'll ask you to sort of like promote the interpretation, you know, like, years ago, I wasn't ready to do that because I knew what I didn't know. And now that I have a better sense of the debates around Marxist economics, I think it's pretty much incontrovertible that the temporal and the single system stuff are both, you know, the reading of Marx, because like it's the only way to actually get his conclusions. And Andrew, in the limited point that he's trying to make in this book, is 100% right. Yeah. Now, like that, yeah. There's some specific quibbles that, you know, for me, it's not even like, I love how limited in scope the book is, because you could still feel like that, you know, the third thing argument doesn't go through totally. But if you accept for autonomous reasons that labor is important, or if you just, you know, if you have like a good, you know, extra premise that, you know, just does the thing that it needs to do or whatever, like this all still works. Or if you want to do like, I don't know, if you want to plug this core into like an Econo-physics project or something like that, you could. Like, you can take this research in a lot of different directions. If you want to create rational choice micro foundations for this, like the analytical Marxists did, you could. Like, you could actually make a robust research program out of this, as long as once you compare it to the broader spectrum of methodologies, you feel like Marx really does have the best theory. And what this book lets us do is finally test Marx's theory, right? Because now we know
that's a really good
basically
point.
What it is. And that's why Andrew, you know, doesn't even really want to say that it's true, because if anything is abundantly clear in academia, is it doesn't matter what is true, you know, like, like the point is that this is the position that this guy had, and that is like as much as he wants to do, and in that the book is a smashing success. So, like, as far as an interpretation of Marx, I don't really see that much room for an alternative interpretation. Like,
okay,
would you say of Marx, you mean of Marx's capital,
when you
right?
said that, the sun came up over the mountain, and it was like this hallelujah moment. It was actually kind of funny.
Well, no, I feel like it was important. It's you know, important to always retain your right to disagree, because you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know, like, there's still interesting like objections, you know, like a better built statistical argument could happen. You know, Fred Mosley has like he's just really reclining in German manuscripts, but like Michael Heinrich, you know, I think you can do that and kind of get some stuff kind of weird or wrong, or have motivated like ways of presenting things, even though your research is overall, I think, you know, very useful.
Yeah,
like
even philological research is quite useful. The logical deduction from it or not.
Right.
And it's my only hesitation with that, Lexi, is I do feel like Marxism actually makes larger Marxism or even Marx's socialism, not even Marxism as a historical tradition, makes larger claims than just what is discussed in the TSSI. This is one element of a broad.
Yes, of course. But what we're really talking about there is Engels' project of systematized Marxism.
No, you're not. You're not.
Yeah, come on. Like historical materialism in historical materialism. Historical materialism in Marx isn't like it's not explicit. It's kind of behind the scenes, and you get like a more spelled out version.
I'm going to throw critique of the Goethe program at your head. All right,
let's not go there. That's for another day. This argument's for another day. That's a good impression. Here, okay, well, you asked everybody apart from Puya. I wanted to say a few things as well, but I'll let Puya go first. Puya, what's your like? Are you a TSSI person after this long process?
I think I'm disposed. I would need to read more on maybe the econo-physics stuff and see what exactly their perspective. To do more reading, but currently I think it's a great interpretation of Marx. It definitely beats all the I mean, Andrew did a great job in taking down the simultaneism, physicalism, and dual systems. And yeah, I think this was a great book. I think Andrew's probably one of the, researcher that Marxism has today. And yeah, I think that's my thought.
Yeah, like
awesome.
I didn't kind of say exactly too much myself. I think like I when I came to this book, when I went to read it, I was highly skeptical. Okay, everything that I'd read out there was saying, value theory falls on its ass. I'd read my Steve Keen and all these other weird things, and it's like I was highly skeptical, and I left quite convinced. And everything I've read in the meantime, this has only convinced me more. One thing I would say is that I do know what Emmanuel is saying. Somebody is rattling, making a noise. I think it might be Derek. So Emmanuel's point about the equalization of profit rates, I think that is a point. I don't think that Marx says they all equalize, because that's not, these are like a toy model that the TSSI is putting forward to show how they can equalize. But in reality, Marx doesn't say they do equalize. So there's a tendency. And to me, that opens up. And I think the whole system of how Marx has described this system opens itself up to a statistical mechanics approach. Because if we think about the key abstraction in the book is value, and that's a micro kind of, it's a micro what's the word I'm looking for? Micro, what do they do when they say it? It's a micro phenomenon, exactly. And a good way to model that for me would be a statistical mechanical approach. That, for example, what Marx would say, the tendency is for things to equalize, but that would have distribution. So for me, like a tendency to equalize over time would actually imply a distribution in reality. Okay.
Yeah. So and there's also tendencies of technological innovation, right? That cause some capitalists to have higher rates of profit, and then
like Marx's
equalization.
Yeah. Perfectly. Yeah, exactly. And Marx is not saying that right now in the US, every capitalist firm has got 13% rate of profit. It's exactly what he's not saying. So I think that the statistical approach is, the econo-physics approach is definitely an approach that I think has got lots of merit. And I know we have these rolling battles between us and antagonist TZ in the chat, and it's kicking off between myself and Puya and Paul Cockshot on one of his videos at the moment as well. But
oh wow,
it's not.
Of course, you realize this means war.
This doesn't anymore. But like for me, it's not a.
Reporting to you live from the war zone.
Yeah, like for me, it's not that we don't. For me, it's a good-natured debate, and I think that their approach has loads of merit, and I think Marx would be very interested in econo-physics if he was around today. And I do think how he would formulate things would be different, because the mathematics that would be available for him to be able to do would be so much better. So
yeah, so
just imagine Marx with a spreadsheet.
No, just imagine him learning R and doing like dynamic stochastic equilibrium models.
Yeah.
He would be using some numerical methods for sure.
He definitely wouldn't be doing DSGE models, dynamic statistical general equilibrium models. So that's for.
I don't think he'd be doing those. But
no, you don't think he would?
Doing those.
I think he'd be doing some stochastic.
They're the worst of all worlds.
Yeah, but you got to be able to like take maths like that and the technology that the maths are running on, and unhook it. You know what I mean?
Doing complexity theory. He'd be using complexity.
He'd be doing complexity theory and using anthropology, because like
that's true.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like all like the person who's like, you guys are getting all weirdly technocratic on me, but I agree with you. Being able to deal with these econo-physics theories is actually very important. But I'm going to continue to reiterate against Lexi, and which is funny because we tend to agree on most other things.
Yeah.
Except dress sense.
That's true too. Although I mean, I think Lexi has great.
I'm going to edit that bit.
Lexi has the best fashion out of all of us. Probably.
This is like I think Lexi objectively dresses better than me, but so
what is he what I'm fucking wearing?
But the issue
Derek, everyone dresses better than you.
Oh, whatever. I think what you say is Lexi dresses better than everyone.
Yeah. That's
Lexi.
That's true.
Wait till I show you what I'm wearing.
And no, not everyone. I mean, like, come on, I work with some people who dress like hobbits. I'm not gonna say names. You know who I'm talking about. The bigger issue I have is that I think this gives us one very vital element to deal with, but I do think we would be doing a discredit to the Marxian research program and what it initially set out to be if we thought this was the end-all be-all of what it is. And that includes writings after this. So like, after the Capella notes and whatever. To say that Marx was not interested in a theory of materialism in history, Engels, it's like it's a weird claim I hear made all the time, and I just don't believe it. Like,
well, you're leaving out an important adjective, and it's like systematized. Like Marx had a lot of insights into this, and he did have an overall like set of like methodological intuitions that he's working with, but like except for some notes that he scrawled when he was like younger, like he never really spelled it out the way that Engels does. Like,
okay, that's fair. And then like the dialectics of nature, as I pointed out to someone who was arguing that that's pure Marxism and Marx read it and okayed it, I'm like, actually his comments on it are cagey. Like he says he likes parts of it, and the other parts he's actually very vague in a way that Marx seemed to have been using terms of art for. The thing is, I'm not interested in a total like worldview version of Marx either, because I think there are questions that are larger than even the larger Marxist project would be. But I do think there is a theory of history that this one element that we can isolate and systematize is part of, and we would need to do this for other elements that are worked out. Whether or not they're a coherent system or not, that we wouldn't know that until you actually formalized everything.
Well, that's why this book is important, because it brings us the orthodox, version of the exploitation theory of profit, from which basically you get one of the paradigmatic cases of exploitation. I mean, actually, it's a unique case because it's weird and spectral and creates this weird like ghost math around the real world that ends up governing it. Like it's fucking like invisible hand on crack.
That's what a fetish is, right? It's weird ghost,
right?
Like because it's alienating social reality.
Yeah, but like the whole concept of the broader exploitation throughout the modes of production, over history, like it's very important that we have a consistent mechanism for understanding capitalism in that way. Otherwise, the whole fucking thing might just be, hey, isn't it great that we overcame exploitation in capitalism? You could start doing that.
I mean, that's what this is. I was just literally talking to someone this morning on another podcast about how like this is the thing, because Hegel and Kant and the almost all of the early idealists whom Marx is responding to and working out of, they come to that conclusion. Like, they have the historical stuff. They even have like basically some notion of class conflict in a way. But like the market's great. Like now we can freely. There's no invisible anything holding us back anymore.
Well, look at the way the analytical Marxists are like the most Pollyannish, like pro-capitalists. Like when you actually get down to a lot of their economics, it's actually very optimistic. Compared to
second internationalism in some ways.
Yeah. It's neo Bernstein, like revisionism, like, and I kind of mean it as a compliment because it's very consistent, in a way that the modern social democracy is like cravenly, like even somehow even worse than one of the two traditions that sold out Marx during the 20th century, like.
Well, is it even selling out Marx? Like, I don't know what it's selling out.
Well, they slapped his face on it. We have to deal with it whenever we read them.
I mean, they've also told me that Marx is, and I don't mean, this is not a disparaging fight with Tom here, I swear, but they've also told me that Marx actually really is Keynes. Somehow.
Right.
Like, and I'm not even talking about MMT here. Like this whole like.
Just.
Like, I mean, there have been articles that have all but said that explicitly, and that kind of stuff makes it the battles that Kleiman was fighting in this book seem so more nuanced.
Okay, let's get things back here. We're going off on a crazy tangent. I just want to point out a very important thing, because anybody see my cat jumper?
Yes, what is this?
I've been really admiring it.
It's Edward Munch's The Scream with a cat's face instead of the human. I actually own that. Bad. I bought that.
Do you really?
I did. I walked past the shop.
That is amazing.
Korean shop in Dublin, and it is the world's greatest jumper. I wore today to a party. It went down a bomb.
That's deviationist you are.
So this is now the official.
This is now the official Alpha to Omega. Lexi, you're under pressure now for your dress sense. I'm coming up right behind you. That's not a euphemism.
I am.
I am so getting.
Yeah. Well, I forget if I mentioned this, but I have like a red Star Trek dress, basically, like Uhura has from the original series. So I'm killing it.
Which is amazing.
Yeah,
there is actually a tank top version of this as well, which is even worse.
Oh, that's
did I see boxer brief versions of that?
Oh my god!
Yeah, I think your hair looks good when you wear it up too.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet.
Let me see.
So before we get too much into where there's this thing that I have on the TSSI.
Okay, all right. Let's go back.
Nice t-shirt.
It's a paper by a by a Korean economist. He's a professor at, I think, Seoul University.
So,
He's written a paper. Hello?
Yeah, keep going.
Hello?
Derek's making noise.
So, okay. And he wrote a paper called An Appraising Critique of the TSSI. I think that's what it's called, which is a really interesting paper. It starts off saying that, yes, TSSI is the interpretation of Marx. It is the only interpretation that makes Marx make sense. So he hands it to Andrew and Alan Freeman that, this is as far as Marx goes, this is the real deal. But then, if y'all still there?
Yep.
I'm getting nervous because I keep dropping
We're
off.
hanging on every word, damn it.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Awesome. So, but then he shows, and I have to read the math more closely, but he proves that the TSSI math can end up with infinite profit and zero surplus labor.
Interesting.
He does it in a very he does it in a very similar way of, you remember the 4p equals 5p thing, where Andrew goes through all these ridiculous things and proves that you can get, labor subtracts value and stuff like that.
Ooh.
He does it in a very similar way, but with the math from this book. And I have to read the paper more closely, but I think it bears mentioning because out of all the stuff we've been handed that is a critique of the TSSI, this is the only one that I thought was actually really worth getting into, because he does it all the way Freeman and Kleiman says you should do it, or at least that's what he claims, and he does agree with Kleiman and Freeman that this is the way to do Marx, but even so, he sort of shows that the TSSI math can actually really break down and achieve some really weird results.
All right.
Well, that sounds like he's made an error, though, because the mathematics in chapter 10 or in the fundamental Marxian theorem is watertight on not being able to get surplus value, like infinite profit and no surplus labor or whatever.
Well, is this maybe about like nominal and real profits?
Let's go on.
This is about value. This has nothing to do with the transformation stuff.
No.
Yeah,
okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, let's keep going, because I know it's nearly 11 o'clock here. We'll run for another few minutes, but I know there's massive part that we haven't done after fucking what must be 28 hours, maybe 35 hours of podcasts.
Oh, Jesus.
Political implications. Let's do it in 2 minutes. Come on. Who's first?
Wait,
Not
I didn't
Derek.
hear what you said.
Let me go to Puya first, and we'll wrap up with Derek. Puya, do you think there's political implications from this work?
Yes, but I think that they're revolutionary.
Good point.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
They're Marxist, right?
Yeah, it comes to Marx's conclusions. It doesn't lead to dismissing the tendency for the rate of profit to fall as an internal barrier to capitalist developments. And I don't think that it necessarily implies the politics of the MHI.
Okay. I would actually agree that it's revolutionary in the sense that it implies that capitalism could actually probably metabolically sustain itself, although with a kind of gradual, with lesser and greater resettings depending on how it resets over time. And Kleiman doesn't do Kondrav wave predictions or anything to try to formalize exactly how that works out, but just puts it out there.
You don't need conjunctive waves for any of that.
No, I know, but that's like normally the answer.
It's something else altogether.
Yeah, well, but that's just Michael Roberts doesn't think it's something else altogether.
Yeah, I know, but Michael Roberts is one guy. You know what I mean? And
but so we could say that about Clement. So like that's not the point. The point is this to me says that he doesn't model that. He doesn't answer that question. Like it's not answered, which is fine. I also think what we mean by revolutionary, and thus the actual specific politics of it, still remain hazy because they're hazy. They're kind of hazy in Marx. Like really, like yes, we know we need to overthrow capitalism.
But, yeah, that's what I mean. That it's he's like a bit more fragmentary than Marxism. Like you could have this theory and then kind of have all kinds of weird political stuff. Like you could be a communizer, you could be a reformist and have this theory.
There was a third worldist who completely believed this book, and Andrew got in a fight with him. But like, I actually thought I was fascinated by this guy because I was like, you what? Like he like took this book and Zach Coates' book and like not even like Jay Sakai, Zach Coates' book, and came up with a theory and totally accepted like both of Andrew's books. And Andrew was really bothered by this. But
theory, it's stuff like that makes me feel that theory is modular. Across disciplines, you can plug things into different sets of intuitions and have models that represent them in different ways that you would never the creators would never ever want it to happen. It's like it's the way science has like a death of the author thing. You can't control what people do with your work.
So are you saying we should read Stephen Jay Gould's Structure of Evolutionary Biology as the third book after this? Because
I would love to if everyone would like to do something that takes as long as Mike Duncan's revolution cycles,
I'd be interested in reading on
I would do
biology.
Yes, I would. That book is 1,000 pages long, lads. We'd be at it from here till about fucking 6 years' time, and none of us knows a lick about genetics.
No idea. I'm formally trained in. I've taken courses in genetics and.
Oh, Puya, good man. That will do it.
Yeah, so.
And I have formal training in anthropology, so.
And biochemistry. I've taken biochemistry and cell signaling. I've taken a lot of classes in biology and biochemistry.
Yeah, I've been interested in philosophy of biology from like a sociological gender standpoint.
Well, that's me. Fucking shut up.
Plus, we have a biologist in our reading group chat. So
I think we have a couple maybe.
God damn it.
Yeah, there's a law student I know or someone that just graduated from law school that wants to read a Structure of Evolutionary Theory.
So suck it, math people.
God. It's a long book. I'd be interested in it, but oh my God, how long would it take us?
You know what? We'll do it if we hit like a Patreon goal or something.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. $1 million.
To pay for us like not having the rest of our lives because we have to read a 1,000-page book and talk about it every week.
It would literally be 1,000. It would literally be 1,000 hours of podcast.
I'd be interested in reading Evolution in 4 Dimensions. I thought that was a great book.
I love that book.
For a second, I thought you were going to say 5 dimensions,
yes.
and I was
yes. I've never heard it mentioned by anyone else in real life. Audibly. I've never even seen anyone bring it up. I'm very excited about this.
That is an amazing book.
It's an excellent book.
What is it?
Oh, this person stresses the importance of her name's Jablanka Lamb, and she's one of the best researchers in epigenetics. And she just stresses the importance of non-genetic inheritance.
Well,
right.
I just saw.
Yeah, she's an anti-reductionist, and talking about 4 different kinds of evolution that are important. Mm-hmm. Four mechanisms of transmission: the genetic, the epigenetic, the behavioral, and the symbolic. Phenomenal.
Okay, let's bring it back on track here.
We're making the math that uncomfortable.
Do we all agree? No, not at all. But I don't want to fucking edit it. Do we agree that there are political implications, and do we all think they're kind of revolutionary, or at least crisis? At least a theory, at least crisis, is important.
Yep. Yeah. In the way that Marx's theory does, like that's the real credit of this book, is that the political implications are Marxist because the theory being defended is Marxist.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm still finishing Puya. I'm still finishing Grossman's thing. I read about 20 pages there yesterday of it, and like,
what part are you on?
I'm on the last part. So
like counter tendencies.
Yeah, God, I'm at like counter tendency number 14 or something. But like to me, like there is literally that many in there.
Yeah.
In the like as a kind of companion book to read with, say, after reading that, I would recommend people to do it because it brings forward in that book. He brings out what does actually this abstraction of value mean, and like to me that's what it's very important to resurrect this idea of Marxist value, and it should reinform, scientifically reinform how we think about the economy, and to me that's very important. Just to let you all know, I just read a tweet here about the
what does
Hegelian.
It mean?
I read a tweet here about the Hegelian dialectic that I thought I should share with you. This is from Opinion Scientist. He says, Hegelian dialectic explained at last. Thesis, dick. Antithesis, but. Synthesis, dick butt.
That's fixed, damn it. It's fixed. Okay? It's fixed. God fucking
so dick butt is the negation of negation.
That's right. You heard it.
The negation.
I thought that you would all enjoy that one.
Yeah, that's good.
That's hilarious.
It is the Fichtean dialectic, but that's fine.
Yeah. That's kind of present, though, and that's kind of present in Hegel and Marx. That structure.
There's
a methodological dispute about it that has some merit, but because it's a Hegelian debate, they call everything, with like fancy names, and I don't know.
They translate the German sometimes and not other times.
Yeah. Fucking Hegelians, are yeah. It's like if you love vagueness, Hegel.
I
fucking love vagueness.
Every word having 3 or 4 meanings, one of which is metaphysical and also maybe or maybe not religious. Hegel, right?
Right, like sublation.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think we.
Let's wrap it up then.
Yeah.
Like any last thoughts? Like we've had, I don't know. I must say I've really enjoyed doing the reading group. I've really not enjoyed doing. Well, I know I do. I like there's a lot of thing and stuff in it, but I really enjoyed doing it. I think like it's got me really enthused. I'm kind of looking forward to the McNair one. Like,
oh yeah.
How do you feel about it after all of this? Has it been worth it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was worth sacrificing half a year's Saturday nights for. I'm not gonna sacrifice the half year Saturday nights. I would like just fucking one Saturday night, fucking not talking about obscure Marxist theory shit. Yeah. But barring that, this has been totally wonderful, and I've drunk as much beer as I would have otherwise anyway. So you guys are great company for parties, even though they're they're online. So yeah, it's been truly wonderful.
Emmanuel, are you telling me that you're sitting at the side of the road in Kyoto, like drinking a 24 ounce? Is that what's going on here?
No. It's morning here now in Sweden. For the entirety of this show, I have never once been sober.
Yeah, high five.
So I am always sober when we do this, and never sober when we plan it.
I'm
Oh my God, that
always
makes so
sober.
much sense.
Yeah.
I'm almost always sober.
Yeah, Puya.
How ironic.
But for you, it's like in the middle of the day, right? To me and Tom, it's already.
Well, that's true.
It's already beer o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is right now. It's Boss Coffee time, which is I love Boss Coffee. Boss Coffee is the greatest. It's so disgusting, but it's just fucking.
Yeah, I mean, I get. I guess
face of Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, the emancipation recording sessions. I guess it's smoke weed after coffee kind of thing. So yeah, I've never been sober for these. I was sober for the early emancipation episodes.
Oh, the ones we did before we did this thing. Like,
yes.
When we were talking about way vaguer crap than this.
Yeah, that's when I was sober. Yeah.
Remember the lost when we actually tried to do value form theory before talking about this book, and I was like,
that was awesome.
I have no idea what anything means anymore.
Sorry, who said value form? Who said it?
No, it's the phrase is value form theory. That's the problem, because otherwise you're going to get flagged Marx, and
Fuck it, it's worth it. It's worth it. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up. Can we all say a very large group goodbye to everybody? And who do we have in the chat? We didn't say anything about the chat today. We have to say in the chat the final day that's in it. We've certainly had some input.
Oh my God!
Thanks for staying with us, guys.
Yeah, we have our most loyal listeners, right? Like they're all here. Thank you so much for
got to
showing up all the time. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Antagonist DZ giving it yards as ever. Dr.
Hi,
Forbin.
Antagonist.
Who else?
Data lore. Got that data lore.
I think that might be it. It might be somebody. Jake P.
We have Dr. Forbin.
Dr. Forbin, Jake P. And I think we've also had Dan. Is there a Dan? Oh, we've had Constantine as well.
Yeah, what's up?
And nearly to the end. Jesus Christ, there's a lot going on in here today. My God. And Dylan. Dylan. Thanks for everybody. And we'll see you anew in the new year with Revolutionary Strategy. Mike McNair. Get yourself a copy. You can buy it on Hulu. It's only about $10. Read it. There's also PDFs floating around.
Yeah, you can totally get it for free legally too. Like,
it is short. It's only about 200 pages. Less. It's about 170 pages of reading. It's not like a TSSI what we've just read. It's a much easier read. It's kind of historical and political. So a good jump away from this terse mathematical dry value theory stuff. So we'll meet us there. Everybody, signing out.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Felicitation.
Happy Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Happy
off button. How do I turn this off? Stop.
Happy Kwanzaa.